Hello and welcome to the What's the Story podcast. I'm Jarlath Kyan.
And I'm Victoria Houston. Each week we'll be focusing on the stories that matter to you. Stories about the people and places that make Tyrone so special.
The What's the Story podcast is brought to you by the Northwest News Group, who also print our much-loved newspapers, the Ulster Herald, Strabane Chronicle and the Tyrone Herald. Enjoy the show.
The long-running battle for new A5 road took another dramatic twist this week. For almost 20 years there have been demands for a new road to improve safety on a route stretching from New Buildings in County Derry to Aughnacloy in County Tyrone. It's a road which has seen so much tragedy over the years. Last October, after many years of lobbying, Stormont ministers gave the go-ahead for the work on the new A5 to begin. Land was vested from local landowners and construction work had been due to begin this year. However, a group called the Alternative A5 Alliance took a case to the High Court in Belfast. They argued the new road would damage the local environment and instead they wanted to see improvements being carried out on the current A5. In a hugely significant ruling on Monday, a judge agreed with arguments put forward by the Alternative A5 Alliance's legal team that the plans for the new A5 do not adhere to new climate change regulations. As a result, the plans as they stand for the new road have been scrapped and the vested land, bought at a huge cost to taxpayers, will be handed back to the landowners. So what now for the A5 project? My name is Kieran O'Neill and for today's episode of the What's the Story podcast, I'm joined by two colleagues from the Ulster Herald, Alan Rogers and Callum McGuigan, to discuss what happened this week and what it means for what has been one of the biggest issues in Tyrone for many years. So Alan, the A5 was obviously back in the news this week, but before we get on to what happened this week, can you explain the background? It's been a long running issue. Can you explain the background to the new A5 road?
The background to it is, Kieran, is that it was first proposed in 2007 as part of the St Andrews Agreement. And I remember in 2009, the summer of 2009, going over to the Silver Birch Hotel in Omagh where the proposed route was first revealed. And there was a sense of excitement and anticipation that suddenly this road that people had been waiting for so long, that it would become a reality. And amazingly now, that's 16 years ago, and during the intervening period the road has been subject to 3 public inquiries, 2 legal challenges, and obviously the latest of them was concluded this week in the High Court when Mr Justice McAlinton quashed approval for the road to go ahead. That approval, of course, was given by the then Infrastructure Minister John O'Dowd last October. So it means that as it stands at the moment, the road cannot go ahead, and for so many people who have been campaigning for the project, including many of those families who have been bereaved as a result of collisions on the route of the A5, that has been a devastating blow.
Why is it taking so long? You know, you're saying it was first put forward in 2007, and obviously these things don't happen overnight, but why in particular is A5 seems they've just problem after problem, issue after issue, you know, and it's obviously the Stormont government has changed and there's been different accusations made against ministers and departments, but why is it taking so long?
Well, I suppose part of the reason is that it is such a major project, because what we have to remember is this is a 57 kilometre road that stretches from Aughnacloy on the border with the Republic basically to New Buildings. Now, across that 57 kilometres, there are so many landowners who have a lot to lose if the road goes ahead. So, you know, there has been those legal challenges, and those legal challenges have been very properly taken by the Alternative A5 Alliance. There's also been the public inquiries, and I suppose one of the reasons why it has taken so long is that the deficiencies within the Department for Infrastructure's proposals have been highlighted and they've been successfully challenged, and then because of that then they've had to go back to basically to the starting point and start again. Like I remember attending the first public inquiry. I've been to them all. I remember attending the first in 2012 myself, and to be honest with you, I found it very interesting, the whole, because I suppose you live along the route, and I found it very interesting how they designed it, and then where it was going, and the various intricacies in terms of construction, and then obviously the cases of people who felt that the road would seriously impact upon their businesses, not only farming but also other businesses as well. So that's why it has taken so long, is because it is such a long route. There have been, statutory public inquiries, and there have been successful legal challenges.
Calmal mentions there the group Alternative A5 Alliance. They were involved in the case this week and taking the case to High Court. Can you explain who is involved in that group?
I suppose the group's made up of different people affected by the plans of the A5, so farmers on the routes and businesses. But they're opposed to the idea of a new road being built because the new road is proposed to be built on their land. So a lot of them have lost their land or had been planned to lose their land. Their land will be vested. So for them, they propose instead that the road is upgraded as it stands rather than a new road being built.
And so what, as I was saying, it was back in the news, what happened on Monday? What was it? You were at the High Court in Belfast. What was the ruling there?
Well, the ruling there was that Mr. Justice McAlinton, and I suppose as a background to that, obviously I mentioned there about John O'Dowd giving approval back in October 2024. During the intervening period, there's been quite extensive preparatory works have taken place along the route. That all the trees have been removed, hedgerows have been removed. Basically, the only thing that hasn't been done is that the bulldozers haven't moved in, and that is still to be done. And I suppose going up to Belfast for that High Court hearing on Monday, there was an expectation not only then but over recent weeks that while there may be some provisos in terms of granting approval, I think the expectation within the DFA and within those who are supporting the route, the expectation was that it would be granted approval. So you can imagine we were all in that judicial review room in the upstairs of the Royal Courts of Justice, and it was quite a packed room. The current infrastructure minister Liz Kimmins was there. The representatives of the Enough is Enough campaign were there. There were various politicians of all shades there, and of course the 8 members of the Alternative A5 Alliance were represented also. And then suddenly at about 20 to 11, Mr. Justice McAlinton came out, and one of the first things that was done was his clerk handed the various legal teams and the members of the media the hard copy of the 100-page judgment. And I suppose then suddenly went to the very end of it and suddenly saw the word quashed. And I think that's where everything changed in terms of the sense of, for the people who were obviously in support of the road, there was a sense of despair and disappointment. It wasn't immediately apparent, but very soon it did become apparent. And the grounds on which that decision were taken was on, first of all, in relation to the Climate Change Act of 2022, and also in terms of human rights. So over the next roughly 2 hours, when the judge was reading out various parts of his judgment, this information was filtering out as it does in the modern society. And as I said, there was, even though it wasn't apparent within the room, you could see it on the faces of the people that they were disappointed, and you could see a sense of satisfaction among the Alternative A5 Alliance that their appeals had been again successful. And it was a very powerful moment, because within that room the outcome of whether or not the A5 would be built was decided. And that road has been a very dangerous road over many years. There have been many tragedies, not just since it was first granted approval back in 2007 or first proposed in 2007, but going back many decades before that, that road was seen as a very dangerous route. And I suppose Callum mentioned there about the upgrades to it, and it will be interesting to see now how things progress in relation to all of that. And both the DFA especially have a lot of soul searching to do over the next number of weeks to decide what their next step is going to be.
You had mentioned there about the land had been invested and a lot of preparation work had been done for the road. And as far as I took it to be, that this was almost a given, that the work was going to begin soon. So what happened on Monday was a massive shock to a lot of people involved in the project. I think there was a general belief that the appeal wouldn't go through. So it leaves it, obviously the department, as you say, has a lot of soul searching. But you mentioned there about the emotion involved in this debate, and we'll all be on that road all the time. Everyone listening to this podcast will regularly be on the A5, and there's been a lot of accidents, a lot of crashes and fatalities over the years. We've seen, and the schools have got involved. We've lost a lot of young people on that road. But the main crux from supporters, they want to see the new road, is the safety issues, isn't it? And that's they're fighting for it. A lot of bereaved families have been involved in it, and what happened this week was a massive blow to them as well.
Yeah, and I suppose fortunately, perhaps at previous court hearings and at previous public meetings, many of the families who have been bereaved were in attendance. Perhaps it was fortunate on this occasion that they weren't in attendance, because obviously they are so emotionally involved in what has happened because of the loss of their loved ones, and it may have been just too difficult for them. So that's one thing that you have to think about it, and you have to think those people have suffered directly as a result. And I have spoken to many of them over the years, and the point that they will always make would be that if the new A5 dual carriageway had been built, their loved ones would still be alive, because the conditions in which they were killed wouldn't have existed. So there is that very powerful aspect to it. But then, as Mr. Justice McAlinton said, he said the rule of law, and I'm paraphrasing him, the rule of law cannot be subverted. And he is, of course, correct in that. And but he also said that he called on the DFA to, and again I'm paraphrasing, to redouble their efforts to ensure that, and he used the word dual carriageway, to ensure that a dual carriageway is built.
Callum, you've been talking to people from the farmer community for quite a while now, and within that community, in terms of the A5 debate, there's you sense that they feel like they're being treated unfairly in a lot of the ways that they're standing up for what they believe is their right to their land or different issues. Alan has explained the arguments for the A5, a lot of it based around safety, and from the farming side, or those opposed to the new A5, is there a sense that they feel they've been treated unfairly?
Absolutely, yeah. I think the main point for them is that a lot of these people have inherited their family farms. They've inherited this land. They have family ties to the land. Spanning back decades, maybe hundreds of years. So for them to have this land taken off them is unfair to them. A lot of them would see the argument for how many people have died on the road as sort of propaganda to get the public to go against them, and to see them as sort of greedy farmers. And they say that's not true. Because at the end of the day, if they lose this land, they're losing income. I suppose for some of them, they're losing a bit of their heritage. They're losing their livelihood. They think that the government is clamping down on them. First it was this net zero strategy, then it was legislation to stop them building, new sheds on their land, and now with the A5, they see this as another step by the government to take land off them. So that would be their arguments.
I think it's also worth mentioning there in relation to that is that the one of the big things that the AA5A has focused on, and justifiably so, has been the potential environmental impact of the A5. Two things are pertinent in relation to that. It's ironic that the road has one of the reasons for the proposed quashing of the road, the approval for the road, has been the Climate Change Act of 2022, and that has obviously been severely criticised by many farmers who feel that it goes too far. So that's one aspect to it, and you know that's an important point.
And in terms of as you have both outlined very well, the powerful debates on either side of this issue, but what happened this week kind of lays a lot of blame at the door of Stormont. You know, the Department of Infrastructure had pushed ahead with these plans, and it was clear, we're no legal experts, but from the reading of the judgment, and they didn't have all their ducks in a row in terms of how they went about this process. So there's been a lot of criticism of the department. In terms of where we go from here, what are the implications of this week's ruling, and what do you see? What's the future of the A5 project?
Well, that's a £1.2 billion question, is what is the future of the road. I think at some point in the next number of weeks or months there will be another court hearing where various points in relation to the judgment of Mr. Justice McAlinton will be raised. But I suppose the key thing for the Department for Infrastructure will be to ensure that the points that were raised in that judgment in relation to the Climate Change Act and in relation to human rights and the fact that the PAC made recommendations that the department didn't address or implement, that those points are now fully addressed. If that happens, and it's a matter of the debate as to how that happens and what needs to be done to make that happen, but if those things are successfully addressed, then potentially there shouldn't be any barrier to the road going ahead. Now, whether or not that requires another period of consultation and another public inquiry and another basically going round in circles in terms of the minister approving the road again and then another legal challenge, I don't think anybody knows at this stage. I really don't. And you know that's the key to it at the moment, and it's anybody's guess, really. But while everybody is guessing as to that, the potential, as Mr. Justice McAlinton said, the potential is that there will be more fatalities on that road and more families that will have to go through the pain of grief, and that's a very, you know, no matter about the road. And in fairness to the Alternative A5 Alliance, they have been very quick and very certain in their sympathy for people. But that's the reality of where we're at, and it's up to the department to find a solution one way or the other where the risk of more deaths is minimised to the absolute degree.
Another important aspect is the Irish government's involvement. You mentioned there that the overall project is going to be 1.2 billion. They've already committed 600 million, and one of their ministers came out today and said that money is still on the table. So how important is the Irish government's involvement in keeping this project alive?
Well, like so many projects in the north of Ireland at the moment, the support of the Irish government, both financially and otherwise, is absolutely crucial. And without that €500 million, I think the financial burden on Stormont would be too much, and that they would have to reconsider and reconfigure what has been proposed in relation to the A5. And from that point of view, the comments by Charlie McConaughey today that the money is there and that it's, I suppose, ring-fenced for the A5 is absolutely crucial. And in a week that has seen such devastation and disappointment in relation to the road, that is a small glimmer of light for those who want to see it proceed.
I suppose for the A5 Alliance, their sort of view on this would be that this is just another waste of taxpayers' money, north and south. They think that, you know, all these inquiries and all these consultations, and even the use of DFI to, you know, start going ahead and placing fences on their land and digging up parts of their land, is all just a waste of taxpayers' money. And they feel that now that this decision has been made, a further consultation, a further public inquiry would just be adding to more wastage of taxpayers' money.
Well, obviously, the A5 has been such an important and divisive, in many ways, issue here for so long, and given the events of this week, it certainly seems like it's going to continue to do so. There's many more twists and turns. Thank you, Alan and Callum. It was very informative. Thanks for your time.